How's it going, guys? Topic for today's video: what was the final cost of this awesome little tiny house that I'm sitting in right now? What is the final cost? Since the tiny house build is pretty well complete, I've noticed that a lot of the questions in these videos is asking about the final cost of the house. So when we first started building, I knew that cost would be a question that would definitely come up towards the end of the build. I really wanted to keep a very accurate tally on exactly how much this house cost, so that it would give people definitely a ballpark idea of how much their tiny house build might cost. So I kept a very detailed list, essentially like an itemized list of everything that we bought for this tiny house, just because I knew that it would come up, and I also wanted to know as well. When we first started the build, I thought it would cost us, I don't know, I was just kind of giving out an estimate. I thought probably around $25,000 or $30,000 was the estimate that I told people. It wasn't really like a budget per se. It's not like we had a certain amount of money like saved up and then we're just like, we can only spend that money. It was just more of an estimate, not really like a strict budget that we're going to. But the total final cost of this tiny house, which includes pretty well everything that you see in it, with the exception of maybe like my shoes and my backpack. But I mean, like all the furnishings, like the fridge, the kitchen, like everything, which includes all the tools that I needed to buy in order to build this house, as well as the cost of renting out our friend's backyard, the registration on the trailer. I mean, pretty well every dollar that had to come out of our pockets in order to build this house. The total cost was just under $35,000. Now, some people might think, holy moly, they might think holy moly in either direction. They might think, holy moly, that's expensive, or holy moly, that's cheap. Now, in my opinion, for a 24-foot tiny house where we did pretty well the majority of the work, like probably 95% of the work, we didn't do the insulation or the drywall. Those are the two things that we had contracted out. And then IKEA has contractors that does the countertops. That was not really something that I could do myself, just because I am not set up to do quartz countertops. So other than those three things, everything else was done by ourselves. And I would say for a do-it-yourself, so pretty well almost all of it was done by ourselves, I would say that our house was probably on the higher end. I know that there's tiny houses that are maybe 20 feet long and they can be done for between $20,000 to $25,000. But adding those 4 feet definitely adds a little bit of cost to the house. But essentially how we built this was, we built this as if it was like the house that we really wanted. So we didn't really hold back in terms of buying the things that we really wanted. For example, like here in this kitchen, the kitchen was actually, I think, the most expensive part of the house. So if you include the fridge, the countertops, and the cabinets, the kitchen itself was the big ticket item. But having a really nice kitchen is it's really important to us, and especially to Hannah, just because she does have a YouTube channel that is directly related to food and recipes. So the kitchen was a really important part for us to have it exactly how we wanted it. Now, comparing the $35,000 to a tiny house that is built by like a specialist, like a tiny house company, I think the $35,000 would probably be on the lower end of that. If you were to do the same house, this exact same house, built by a tiny house company, I'm sure it would probably be at least $45,000 to $50,000, just judging by how much labor goes into this. So in that regard, the tiny house seems maybe a little bit cheaper, but you also have to understand how many hours of time that we put into building this. Like, there's a lot of hours. It was built over the period of about 6 months or so. And most of those weeks, I was working on the house at least 3 or 4 days a week, spending at least 5 to 8 hours each of those days. So I didn't keep a tally of how many work hours that I put into the house, just because that would have just been very hard to keep track of. But I would say our house is definitely exactly how we wanted it. And I think that's the most important thing, is that we can walk into this house and be like, this is the house that we wanted to build. And we didn't really have to make any sacrifices in terms of the materials or what was inside the house. The house is exactly how we want it. So the price to us is not, super important, but I can totally understand that it's gonna be much more important to other people. I'm gonna break down the cost of some of the bigger ticket items in this house, just so that people have an idea where maybe they can save a little bit of money when they're building their tiny house, or just for people that are just curious about it. So the cost of the kitchen, including the fridge, the countertops, the cabinets, that was about $5,000 just for the kitchen. So some people might think like, whoa, that's a really expensive tiny house kitchen. But also, when you think about it, a $5,000 kitchen is very cheap when you compare it to the kitchen of, say, just like a standard size house, where the kitchen price could be, $10,000, $20,000. Kitchens are definitely, they can definitely be one of the most expensive parts of a house. But like I said earlier, the kitchen is definitely the most important part in this tiny house for us. So the next big ticket item in this house is what the house is sitting on, so the trailer. The total cost of the trailer, including the registration for like our license plate, it came to just about $4,500 just for the trailer. One major thing to consider about the length of your tiny house is the length, as it gets longer, the trailer gets much more expensive. Not only does the trailer need, more steel in order to be longer, but the major cost when you're upping the size is basically the weight rating of the trailer. So our trailer is rated up to 14,000 pounds. It's 24 feet long. So say you only built a 20-foot long tiny house, you'd probably be able to get away with a trailer that's rated at 10,000 pounds instead of going up to 24 feet and 14,000 pounds. So I remember when we were getting some comparison quotes with the trailer, is that from the trailer to go from 12,000 pounds for the max weight rating up to 14,000, there's definitely a big increase in the price. I think it was probably at least $400 or $500. So if you only need a 20-foot long tiny house and you don't need a 24 or 28-foot long tiny house, and say you're trying to do this like very economically, going for the shorter tiny house is always going to be a lot cheaper. Plus you also have to factor in that if you're only building a 20-foot long tiny house as opposed to a 24-foot long tiny house, that's 4 feet less of materials. So for example, in this tiny house, if you're to shorten it 4 feet, that means there'd be 30 square feet, approximately about 30 square feet less flooring. And since the flooring was about $100 for 30 square feet, you'd save yourself $100 there. Plus you're gonna probably have less windows. You're gonna need less materials in terms of the siding, which is another big ticket item. The siding, the lumber, basically finishing it off on the inside, the trim, etc., etc. So the length of the tiny house will also play a big role in how much it's gonna cost. During the build, when the house was in Tucson, a couple actually came and visited our tiny house, and I was like, how much money do you guys have saved up? Because I knew at that point that we were spending around $34,000, $35,000, and this house is 24 feet long, and they wanted to build a 28-foot long tiny house. And I'm like, realistically, you guys are probably gonna need, if you're doing it all yourself, you're gonna need at least $35,000 to $40,000 saved in order to build the house that you want. So just know that the length of the house is definitely an important consideration to factor when you're talking about cost. So the kitchen and the trailer are the two biggest ticket items in the house. I would say the next one, and some of you might not even believe me on this one, but the next biggest cost in terms of like a major building component is the siding. So all the 1x6 cedar for our house, it was special ordered through a company in Tucson, and I think the total cost of that was just over $3,000 just for the siding. Plus it took over 10 days of work to basically do the installation for the siding. So the siding was not only very time consuming, but it was also another major cost component of the house. All the hardwood flooring in here wasn't like an astronomical cost or anything like that. It was, I think it was just over $1,000. That includes all the flooring for the main floor and for the 2 lofts as well. There's hardwood in all those 3 areas. The metal roof for this house wasn't that expensive. I think it ended up coming out to about $1,200 because I got all these extra little fancy pieces that were special for this house. I got those. The electrical wasn't that much. I think the electrical was just somewhere over $1,000 or so, but we could have cut the cost of the electrical down a little bit if we didn't have so many pot lights. So there's 14 pot lights in here, and if you include the pot light housing and the trim, which includes the LED lights, it's like 40 bucks a pop plus all the wiring for it. So I really didn't want like standard lighting boxes. I really wanted the pot lights. Oh yeah, one other thing to keep in mind with the length of the trailer is that if you plan on moving the tiny house yourself, as the house gets longer and you have more heavy things in it, you're gonna need like a bigger truck in order to move it. So for some of the smaller tiny houses that are maybe like 16 feet long, you can probably get away with like an F-150 style truck, but you need at least like an F-250 or an F-350 in order to tow this tiny house. So that might be a consideration for people as well. Windows are another costly item in houses. I think ours were about $2,200 or $2,300 for all, I believe there's 13 windows in here. So that was another big cost of the house. So for example, if you had a smaller house, like a 20-foot house, maybe you'd only need 10 windows and then save yourself the cost of 3 windows, which could be anywhere between $300 to $500. Quite a few people have asked me if I'm gonna be writing a book on tiny houses. So I will be writing something within the next probably 3 to 4 months. It'll be released, just basically talking about our entire experience from beginning till essentially right now to the end. And within that book, I'll have that spreadsheet, that itemized basically price list of everything that we put into this tiny house. Plus I know there's a lot of areas in the house that we could have saved money. So it's like you don't need to spend, you know, $5,000 on your kitchen. Maybe you only need to spend $1,000 or $2,000. So all in all, with the final cost coming in just under $35,000, I know that I'm really proud of this house. I love the way that it looks on the inside. I love just coming out here and sitting in it, or just sitting outside. It's really nice. Like, I really love it. It's this great, clean, minimal style house that Hannah and I really wanted, and I'm really proud of it. And I think it's really awesome that we own this completely outright. Like, the bank can't take it from us or anything like that. There's no mortgage attached to this. Like, this is something that we own. We can essentially move it anywhere in the world, but realistically, you know, we can move it anywhere in North America relatively easily. I think it's awesome. So for the price, we have a house that we can live in for, I don't know how many years that we're gonna be living in here, but yeah, it's pretty awesome. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you like my t-shirt, definitely check out Ethics and Antics. I'll leave a link to their website down below. It's an awesome vegan clothing brand, and they actually just released a recipe book as well, which I've been fortunate enough to check out, and it's freaking awesome as well. And if you have any more questions that you want me to answer in video, leave them down below. And if you see a question down below that you want me to answer, give that comment a thumbs up, all right? Awesome. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Catch you on the next video. Peace!